some of the biggest surprises that I found since I've been retired. Now that it's been about a year, just over a year, since I've actually been formally retired, I've learned a few things, some things I've had to change, some things that were pleasant surprises, and some things that were a little bit unpleasant in the surprise territory. And I want to talk about a few of those things because, you know what? I didn't expect all of these changes to come on as fast and furious. And of course, as I was sent into retirement, I had to adapt very quickly. A lot of us are, have the advantage of retiring on our own times, on our own cue. I was planning to retire probably in that 55 to 57 range, but I was pushed into retirement a little bit early at 53. So while that was an amazing thing, and I truly believe that was the best at the end of the day, there was a few things that surprised me, a few things that I didn't really expect, and I certainly wasn't ready for as I retired at 53. So let's just talk about some of those. The first thing for sure is this change and shift in perspective of what actually costs to live. When you find yourself on a smaller income, or certainly you're having to change your spending habits, it's how expensive things actually are. I mean, we've seen in the last couple of years how prices have gone up on everything. I mean, you go look for a car and it's sticker shock. You go to the grocery store and it's bananas, pardon the pun. Things are gone up grossly in the last 5 years or so. And that's even more so pronounced when you're retired. Unfortunately, this is just something we all deal with and you have to get used to it. But the very idea that having to adapt at a time when we're seeing some of the biggest increases is the fact that that's the time that all of a sudden income has dropped off. So that whole sticker shock idea has hit a lot harder. I find going out to restaurants now, doing it more from a perspective of, do I need that beer? Do I need that glass of wine? Maybe I do, and there are times I do, but quite often I'll just have that glass of water, thanks. And so we'll go out to eat, and we might all have our meals, and you have to live. So I do believe, you've got to have the big part of going out to eat, I feel, is more the experience. It's out there having the chat, sitting around with 4 or 5, 6 people for a nice dinner, having a nice dinner, having, something that you don't eat every day. Maybe it's a steak, maybe it's a chicken sandwich, I don't know, whatever it is. But half the experience isn't the eating, it's the chat with the people around you. You're probably there with friends or relatives that you enjoy being around. And so that's the time that I really enjoy. But that said, every time you go out to eat, every time you pick up a menu, or maybe you're out shopping for a car, or even looking at real estate, you'll notice the cost of living has gone through the roof. And it's even more now, way worse once you're retired, because you're now thinking about, well, I can't make that up. I can't just go back to work and double time down. I can't, take on that overtime. I can't look at that income that has a possibility of growing every single year. Most people are getting income increases, in that 2 to 3 to 4% every year, but that kind of goes away once you're retired. So the idea of losing some of that income creates this sort of sticker shock effect, and now that's a big impact, and it's a bit of a surprise. Another thing that's quite shocked me, actually, substantially in retirement, is that I'm finding myself far busier than I ever expected. I mean, you expect that you retire, you have this vision of either traveling and sitting on the beach, or this vision of sitting on the rocking chair followed by a casual walk with the dog and grabbing a coffee, and really have nothing else to fill your day. Well, it's actually been quite the opposite for me. Now, granted, it's been a pretty hectic year, of course, trying to recuperate from, of course, loss, dealing with my parents' loss. Naturally, as the executive of the estate, I was having to clean up the home and deal with all of those affairs. That's kept me very, very busy, but also this transition into retirement, from the workspace, of course, dealing with some of the retirement numbers and some of the facts that it takes to actually transition into retirement, because now I was fast-tracked, so you're dealing with accountants, you're dealing with bankers, you're dealing with lawyers, you're dealing with all of those other people. So that all comes with appointments. Of course, naturally now, I had some recent health things that I had to deal with. Of course, I had a bit of an issue with the tooth, so I had to go to multiple different doctors and all kinds of surgeons and all kinds of different people for that. health issues, regular doctor checkups. Naturally, you're doing your side hustle, which I've been doing and I've been very, very busy at. So I get up every day and I'm very focused and motivated to deliver a lot of that content to you guys. But realistically, a lot of it too is just running around errands, fixing this, project that. And now I find that you feel that when you're working, you sort of get in this train of what's your priorities? Work, come home, eat, take kids to maybe sports, and then rinse, lather, repeat. And this goes on. And a lot of the other things in your life take a back seat. You're not taking care of some of those health things. Maybe you're not going to the gym as much. Maybe you're not doing all these side hustle because you're working full time. And so you get into a different train. But once you retire, you open your eyes, you figure there's something new. I have to do something different. And you do. And this is where I'm at now. And I find myself actually far busier. And that's both good and bad. I mean, the good in that you're never bored. And I truly am never bored because it feels like every day there's something new. And if I need to slot in one time spare where I don't have something to do, then I go get a massage. Okay, great. I still have a few benefits hanging around. And so there's an opportunity to just fill my days. And my days are never empty. I'm busier now than I've ever been. I'm busier now than I ever was at work, if you can believe it. And so the idea of not having anything to do isn't necessarily what I anticipated going into retirement looked like. I actually am far busier now. I'm just very busy and active in doing this and taking care of, medical things and, like I said, finances and even side hustle and home cleanup and, dealing with sheds and cleaning up things like that. A lot of different things, selling parts from the garage, cleaning up the garage, of course. Your days are busier than you actually expect. And that's a good thing, but that's a huge surprise once I hit retirement. Another surprise in retirement in this last year is I realized you really don't have a whole lot of friends. Not good friends anyhow. And while I've expressed this before and I've shared a video on this and it's absolutely a topic that's going to hit home. And as you retire, you're going to realize that yourself. And a lot of people would rather be lone wolves. I don't mind being that way because I've always been a little bit more of an introvert in the sense of in my social circles. If we go out for, go out with a group of people at work or, we have a social outing, I'm usually just sitting back, listening, taking it all in rather than being the main contributor and the loudest voice in the room. So it works out okay for me, but it is a bit of a surprise. And a lot of people you worked with, a lot of people I worked with, I truly believed would be more involved in my life after I retired. Surprisingly, a little bit, a lot of those people, even the ones that I considered were relatively good friends in the workspace, they pretty much all but vaporized. I never heard from them again. The only thing I heard from initially was, what happened? Where'd you go? What's going on? Really, it's just inquisitive minds want to know. But realistically, those friends just seem to drift away. And I've created that video. I'll share that link at the end of the video here. So if you want to learn more about that experience, I will certainly share that with you. But that is something that I was surprised. There's far less people in your circle. I spend more time, quality time with my kids now. I'll take them out. We'll go grab a coffee, spend a little more time with the wife, the dogs. We do a lot more active, participation in these videos and side hustles. But friends, far and few between. I have a couple good long-term friends that I keep in touch with, but outside of that, I really don't have a lot of friends. I have, however, relit some chats with some old friends that I haven't talked to for a while, and you'll find yourself having to do that from time to time. Maybe reach out. Don't feel shy. Reach out to those people that maybe you haven't talked to for a while. But friendships, they do tend to go away, and it makes you realize that people at work are not your true friends. Another thing I've realized since retiring, I thought when I retire, I'm going to be able to enjoy all those things. We have a boat and, we have a small little cabin out in the woods as well as our primary residence. And you think when you retire, you're going to enjoy all these things and these toys. But I'll be honest, the idea of having these assets becomes less enthusiastic. The very idea of simplifying seems to be hitting me a lot more than I ever thought it would. Now, we expect that we're going to simplify. We're trying to reduce some of our spend. We know that. You want to reduce, not have car loans, not have mortgage payments. Trying to eliminate all of that stuff prior to retirement as well as any kind of debt is pretty typical. But it goes a step further because once you start retiring or once you're retired, at least I find, is that a lot of those things no longer seem to matter as much. You're starting to stare down the barrel at your mortality. And you're starting to realize, okay, I'm on the last third of my life. this is getting real. Do I need all this junk? And so now you're starting to think about, do I need these extra properties? Do I need some of these extra things, these toys? I don't know if I need any of that. And so now you're just more thinking in simpler terms, trying to, downsize, trying to thin the herd, if you will, from things and assets and toys that you maybe aren't using regularly. Some of them you might. Some of them you might use more. There might be something, maybe you have this little, a little motorboat that you like to go fishing with, and it's maybe got a 10-horse Johnson hanging out the back, and you maybe just decide to start going fishing more. So you might have a toy that you haven't used in 7 years, but now you're finding the time to use it, and you might find yourself using it more. But realistically, the vast majority of things that you have as you were in your building part of your life, so through your 30s and your 40s, through the most productive years, the most productive building years of your life, you're finding now turning the page and starting to ask yourself that question. Do I need all these things, these toys, these assets? I don't know. Because at this point, once you start getting a little older, it all starts to be transition from being an asset to more of a liability. Cost, insurance, maintenance, putting gas in something, taking care, cut the grass and other properties. Doing these things, they all seem to add up to extra burden to the life. That's the last thing we want, is extra burden. But I'm starting to realize that the enthusiasm for having extra goods or assets no longer really is quite what it used to be. And while you still like some of your toys, the idea of having as much of that, or having a wider, diverse group of assets or toys to sort of fill those different wants or needs, that need goes away. There's less and less of that, and your focus becomes more tight to those few things that you really enjoy doing, rather than those vast amount of things that you kind of liked doing. You get it? So another thing that I came across in my mind that was a surprise, and that's this shift to change in who you are and your identity. Because, when I was in my go-go years, or you think about, in your 20s, you're building, you're learning. In your 30s, you're sort of settling in, you're starting to find your niche. In your 40s, you're in there, you're in your stride. And your 50s as well, you're starting to roll into it. But in your 50s, you're already starting to think, okay, I need something bigger and better. And sort of there's this shift in your 50s. But certainly 30s, 40s is your big years of building, and you're known as one thing. Whether it's whatever your profession is, are you an engineer, are you a doctor, a police officer, a lawyer? It doesn't matter, but that's the point. You're living that life, and you're contributing, and you're bringing, the resources home for a big part of what, your family thrives on. And so myself and my spouse, my wife, have always worked together hand in hand, both worked full time, and pretty much both helped support the family. But things have changed. She's still working. She's kind of on the tail end of her career. I'm now retired. And now it changes. My attitude about what I am, what I'm doing, and all those ideas of who I was in my go-go years has all changed. I'm no longer that primary contributor. I'm now contributing in other ways, but I'm no longer, in the electrical space. I'm now rather in a different space, maybe a little bit of content creation, maybe homemaker, maybe father, maybe husband, maybe I'm into other things, and I just like to strut around and, open my eyes and ears, and just open to new experiences. But one thing I'm not is no longer that electrical person. I'm not in that space anymore. And it's that shift that has taught me that it's a big adjustment to make that change and pretty much give up everything you knew for the last 20 to 30 years. Huge impact and a big surprise. And another surprise in retirement that I found in this last year is I never thought this would ever come. I even shared a video on it, which I'll link at the end here. How much, in fact, that not only do I respect my dad and how much I hold him in high regard, and the fact that he unfortunately had passed away a few short years ago, how much I'm actually becoming like him. I'm starting to hear myself sound like him. In some ways, I look like him. And a lot of the attitudes I take on are a lot like he has lived a lot of his life. And a lot of that's integrity, a lot of that's hard work, a lot of that's nonstop and never giving up. But I want to talk more about that. If you want to hear more about one of the biggest inspirations in my life, my dad, definitely want to check out that video. And as well, as I also promised you, where did the friends go? Please do drop a line, and we'll see each and every one of you real soon. Bye-bye.